So first off, what is your name?
I'm Richard Lemunion, former Wichita police chief.
And then when and where were you born?
I was born in Wichita, Kansas in 1940, right before World War II. I was a baby during the war.
And then what made you want to become a police officer?
I think it was my last speeding ticket. I'm not sure. I decided, actually when I was in high school, I told my dad that I really think I want to be a police officer. And my dad, he looked at me and he said, "Oh, son," he said, "you ought to be a firefighter. Everyone loves a firefighter." Well, I went away to the Navy because I was only 18 when I got out of high school, and I had to be 21, and I had never seen the ocean in, I'd seen pictures of it or movies. So I joined the Navy and sailed the world. So I saw a lot of it. So when I did come back in 1963, the Vietnam War was just starting to heat up. And I wasn't sure I was going to get out of the service, but I did. And I joined the police department in 1963.
And then how did you become, what was the process of getting to the chief of police?
When you're into when you joined the police department, when I did in 1963, you had to go to Wichita State University for 2 years, and that was called a police science course. It was like an associate's degree, and the city paid for it. Also during that time when I was there was a lot of riots and everything that was going on. So one of the perks that they gave you is that the government would pay your way to go to college, and they would pay all the books and all the tuition, but you had to make a C or better, and then you had to stay in law enforcement for 3 years after that semester, and then you didn't have to pay it back. So it took me a while because I was married by this time and we were raising a family, and I was working as a police officer and part-time jobs. And so from the time I started till the time I finished my master's degree was 13 years. But so anyway, I was able to get my bachelor's degree and my master's degree. And then as I progressed in the department, there was ways of, you took tests and you applied for certain, like sergeant, lieutenant, captain and things. And so I rose up through the ranks. I was pretty blessed with the progress that I made. And then we get a new city manager, and he was going to look for a new police chief. And it was a nationwide search, 110 applicants. 9-month process. So I put in for it. I'd only been on the department 13 years. I was only 36 years old. And when the smoke cleared 9 months later, 110 applicants, I ended up police chief. I was the youngest police chief in the history of the department. So.
And then how did you get involved on the BTK case?
Well, BTK, when it first began, I was what they call a bureau captain. I was a uniform captain in charge of what they call second shift. I had like 225 officers that worked for me, and we handled all the patrol duties, all the patrol officers you see running around town and stuff. I had charge of that shift. So as a command officer, I was briefed on all the major cases that were going on. And of course, when the Oteros were killed in 1974, I was briefed on that case, and that was the time when the mother and the dad and one of the young daughters and a little boy in the family were killed. There was 4 of them, so obviously that made the news. So I was briefed on it, knew about it. And of course, the detectives thought at that time it was probably some kind of a drug-related thing, something of that nature, just because of the nature of it and the horrible way in which they were killed. But as time went on, obviously it turned out that wasn't it. And then in 1976 is when this chief things came about, and then I was put in the chief's position in 1976 after 13 years as a captain. The Oteros had already happened, but then later that year there was another case called the Kathy Ebright case, which turned out to be the fifth victim. And this was a case where BTK had gone in, had stalked her. She was a college student, Wichita State, and she came home while he was in there, but her brother came home with her. Mm-hmm. So he knocked the brother out, tied him up, and then he went in to kill her and bind, torture, kill. That's what he did. And during the process, the brother woke up and got loose. So he went in to help his sister, and BTK shot him in the head. And he thought he was dead and went ahead and killed Kathy. And then the brother woke up and ran out of the case. So we didn't know for a while if that's who it was, but we did know that we got a communications as a result of that, because in some of the investigations and things, we arrested the Sebring brothers, who were some perverts, but they weren't murderers. Yeah. And as a result of that, we started getting communications from him. His first was a letter that he left for us down at the city library in a book, and he called and told us where it was at. So that's how the communication started. So that's how I got involved in it. Yeah. And then as chief, I had him give me all the information, or I reviewed it all. I didn't take it out of it or anything, but looked at it, saw what the situation was, and decided at that time that we didn't know that this was a related case. We didn't know, but there was some of the ropes and some of the other stuff that he left at the Otero case. It was left at Kathy's house. Yeah. So that's kind of when I got involved in it.
And then, like, what happened from there, like, after that?
We had an open investigation. Homicide investigations never are closed. They're always open cases. And so we had an alert for all the homicides in our region, our city, and around our region, that if we got anything close to what looked like, you know, it could have been the BTK, then we were called into it. The next case that I was involved in, and I was the chief at that time, was in the late 70s, and there were two cases. Number one was Shirley Vian. Shirley was a single mother, had four little ones. I think the oldest one was like 8. And he had gone in to Shirley's house, or knocked on the door, and the kids let him in. And he locked the kids in the bathroom, and then he did his ritual on Shirley and killed her, strangled her, and left her on the bed. And then the kids, while this was going on, escaped out the window, or he probably would have killed them. So they got away. We did interview the kids, and the oldest boy, who could tell us anything at all, was special needs. So we did try to get what information, and we did learn that there was a white male, which we suspected that all along. We did learn also that he had a black, like a briefcase that he carried, and that's what he carried: his rope, tape, and other tools that he used for the trade. So that was that case. And then the next one that followed shortly after that was Nancy Fox. And Nancy was a young single woman, lived by herself in a completely different part of town. And he went into her house, waited on her. He stalked all these victims. He stalked them. He knew what he was going to do when he went in. And in those days, we didn't have cell phones, but he would always cut the phone wire before he went into the house. So Nancy was the next victim. And when the officers got down there, but before they got down there, he called the dispatcher and he left a message. And he said, "You will find a homicide." And then he gave the address and her name. Mm-hmm. So obviously the officers went down there and they found Nancy. And it was the same ritual that he'd gone through with some of the Oteros and with Shirley and others. So we knew right away that was BTK again. Mm-hmm. So the next incident we had was shortly after that, and this was an older lady. She was 63 years old. I think Nancy, bless her heart, I think she was only 24, 25 maybe. Annie was a widowed lady, lived by herself, and he broke into her house and was waiting on her. But instead of coming, she'd gone out that night with her family, and instead of coming home that night, she went to spend the night with her daughter. Mm-hmm. So he left, but he wrote her a note and sent us a note through the news media with one of her bandanas that he had stolen out of her house. Mm-hmm. So he didn't get to her, but she obviously left town and moved. So at that time, what we did is we put together a task force, and I announced that we had a serial killer in the city, and what they should watch for and everything. And then I put together a group of detectives, older detectives that had been working the case. Then I put also some patrol officers on it and some young detectives. And we knew at this point that we were looking for a white Caucasian male. We had traced one of the letters and things back to Wichita State, the Commons area where the students go together, to get coffee and stuff. Yeah. And in those days, there were only so many copy machines. They weren't readily available like they are today. Mm-hmm. And we were able to trace it back to a copy machine at Wichita State. So we knew we were looking for a Caucasian male, probably in his early 30s, and that he was either a WSU student or had probably attended Wichita State University. Mm-hmm. So the first thing we did is we tracked all the sexual offenders that we had. We knew that he had a perversion, and that this was the type of person we were after. And at that day there was a movie came out called Ghostbusters. Mm-hmm. Okay, well they dubbed this group, the news media did, they named this group Ghostbusters. Mm-hmm. But the idea was to put the case together, to make sure that everything that we were doing, number one, the goal was to catch this guy, identify the guy, and if not, leave it in such a way that the investigators who came after us could just pick it up and go again, because we were convinced if we didn't catch him, he would kill again. Yeah. We had FBI people come in. We had all kinds of profilers that looked at it. We had psychologists, psychiatrists look at it, and they all kept telling us that this guy is still killing, if not in Wichita, somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Either that or he's in prison or he died. And we kept coming back, our guys, and we kept saying that's not right. Mm-hmm. He's still one of us, and the reason we can't find him, he's hiding out in the open. Mm-hmm. He's one of us. He goes to the same grocery stores we go to, probably has a family. Well, it turned out he did. He had a wife, a family. He was a Boy Scout leader. Mm-hmm. Went to church. Mm-hmm. That's why we couldn't find him. Yeah. But we just kept coming back to that. So by the time we dissolved several months later, the Ghostbuster, we had arrested several pedophiles and other kinds of individuals, and we had a really solid case. We had taken all the evidence that we had secured from the Otero murders from every site. We knew that he was taking trophies. Mm-hmm. We knew that, for example, in the Otero case, we knew that he took a Playboy bunny radio that the dad had. Mm-hmm. So we knew that was missing. We knew that the the mom's driver's license was missing. So, and in every case that we had with, whether it be Nancy or Shirley or whoever, he took something every time. He also was taking Polaroid pictures, because what he would do is he would send us, he was teasing us, and he would send stuff to one of the TV stations. He liked Channel 10 or the newspaper, and he would put sketches in there. He wouldn't send the actual photo, but you could tell that he had taken pictures. So, and then then it kind of dissolved for a while, and the next victim that we had was Maureen Hedge, and she was an older lady from Park City. And then the next victim was Vicki Waggerly, and Vicki was a young mother. Her husband was at work. She had a baby at home, and that was down on 13th Street. So he went in and killed Vicki, but he didn't harm the baby.
Yeah. He
left the baby was just an infant, and the husband came home, found him. So, and then the last one was a 62-year-old Dolores Davis. She also was from Park City. He killed her, took her to the church, took all kinds of pictures of her, and then took her body out and dumped it over a bridge. He was just true evil from day one to day two. So the important thing is that we did know he was a white male. We did know he was one of us. We did know he went to Wichita State. We thought he was a police officer or a wannabe. It turned out he was a wannabe. He tried to get on the police department, but was rejected for psychological reasons. So,
I don't know that.
Yeah, so he didn't make the cut. And as we look back, all the evidence that we obtained from the first crime scene, he always wore gloves, but they left a certain trace. He always left semen. He never violated the women physically, but he left semen there, so we had that. We didn't even know how to preserve that in those days. We froze some of it, we dried some of it, and we put some of it in water. But the point is, it all held together.
Yeah. And
technology caught up with him in terms of DNA. We didn't have DNA. Well, eventually we did have DNA.
Yeah.
We didn't have computers, but eventually we did have computers. So technology actually caught him. On the 30th anniversary, when they made a big deal out of it, the news media got involved in it. That's when he started communicating with us again. So we knew he was still out there. And the chief at the time, we talked to him, and Kenny Landwehr, who was the lieutenant in charge of homicide, and myself. And we had a three-prong approach. The chief, Norman Williams, said, I'm not going to have anything publicly to do with it. Kenny Landwehr will make all the news releases, and they'll all be scripted, because we were trying to get him to communicate with Kenny or with me, or through the media. Well, it turned, and then I would just do interviews, just general interviews and things of that nature. I sat on panels and things of that nature. So that's the way we did it. And then as he kept leaving trophies for us to find, we knew he had trophies. We knew where they came from. So we were able to trace that back. And finally, when he dropped one of the trophies off at a Home Depot place, we caught that car on a video. Yeah. And we were able to trace it back and finally figure out who we thought it was. So that's how it all come together. And then once he was in custody, we were ready to go to court. Well, obviously, it was his day. He just wanted to tell everyone what a great person he was and what he had done. So he confessed everything. And I don't know if you've ever had any reason to even look at the sad way he went about it. He talked about it like he had to put him down like he did a rabid animal, or, or a rabbit, he just, evil, true evil. So it was a case for law enforcement. It was a historical case in that it lasted 30 years through all kinds of investigators. And had we had to prosecute him in court, the whole thing would have held together.
Yeah.
So that was remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
So I know it's going longer than you wanted to go, but
No, it's totally fine. Like during this whole time, like, were you like scared for your family at all, and like their safety?
We took precautions, but the whole community took precautions.
Mm-hmm.
People at your age during that period of time, especially girls,
Yeah.
It was scary because one thing about this, if you look at the victims here, there's nothing common about them. Normally, when you get a serial killer, there's something. For example, nurses. We've had serial killers that just go after nurses for some reason, or they go after little boys, or they pick prostitutes. You know, there's something, but these truly random.
Yeah.
We kept trying to connect these people. There was no connection whatsoever. So that was unusual. The other thing is that when you get into a serial murder, a true serial murder, most police departments never deal with one.
Yeah.
And even if your department does, you don't get involved in it. It's a very select group of people. So it's a very unusual thing, and every one of them are different. But what they tried to keep telling us was, this is a pattern, this is what they do. And we kept saying, no, not this guy. And so in answer to your question, yes, the community was afraid. My family, we took precautions. I mean, my wife was, concerned, and she had younger sisters and things of that nature. People, like for example, someone your age, specifically if you were on college campus or if you were, they were people that would literally escort you, that, 2 or 3 of you. It was a scary time for them, and of course everybody thought, well, it'll never be me, but that's what they thought too. And so, we use caution, common sense, and I personally never felt a threat for my family, but I know my family felt the threat.
Yeah.
And therefore you take whatever precautions you can. And most people that grew up in that area, that was around during that period of time, they can tell you. They remember that time very vividly, and can talk about it. And this is off the record, but I literally went and got a haircut today, and when I walked in there, a lady came up to me and she said, I want to thank you for your service and for helping catch BTK. And I thought, no, what's the odds of that, Jim? You're going to do an interview there. She literally said that in the Great Clips right down there at New Market Square. So
do you get that, like stuff like that a lot?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, and a lot of times what they'll say is, boy, you did a great job. What they don't understand is my people did the job. I mean, I let them do it and aimed them, but they're the ones that did the work. They're the ones that tracked this guy down.
Yeah.
So, but it happened. But it's good. They're all people are. It was literally a period of history that those that lived through that will never forget.
Yeah. And then, do you think this is like the case that defines your police career, or no?
Well, I think, no, not necessarily. I think it is one, that drew the most attention, but there were several other cases. There was another case called the Poet case going on about the same time, about a lady, and that goes into a lot of depth. But I was involved in, I never did want to be a detective, for example, but obviously I got involved in detective cases. But there was a lot of other things that were, for example, during my period of time as police chief, I had to bury 2 different officers who were killed in the line of duty.
Yeah.
And those were extremely difficult times for anybody. But I would say, in answer to your question, this was the one that got the most notoriety, if you will. They've written books on it. They've done movies on it. I've done numerous interviews.
Do you ever get tired of talking about it?
Well, I took a break from it. I really did.
Yeah.
Because I kept saying, well, how many more different ways can you do this?
Yeah.
And I'm just like you said, you had watched one of the documentaries or something. I don't know which one you watched.
Yeah.
I get that all the time. In fact, a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, my wife and I were in Connecticut getting off of an elevator in the middle of nowhere. It was a law enforcement torch run conference. I started a not-for-profit type deal for Special Olympics. We literally got on the elevator and this other gentleman got on and he looked at me and he said, "I just saw you on television." I'm in Connecticut for crying out loud. I said, "Really?" And I thought maybe he was with the group. He said, "No, it was on the BTK thing." I said, "Oh, okay." I didn't know him from John Adams. I didn't know him. So yeah, I get it a lot.
Yeah.
But most of the people are very kind. Like the lady at the barber shop, she's very, very nice, very kind, very appreciative. And I think when they see me, you'd think as old as I'm getting that they would forget, but they don't. And they just come over to you and I just want to shake your hand and thank you for. But again, I was just one small part of it. I mean, this is a 30-year investigation with numerous investigators, and I probably got as much follow-up out of it as anyone, but just because of the position I was in.
Wow.
Okay.
Thank you.
You gonna make a story out